You want to talk about some of the other teams in the LEC? Because
Sure.
I'm deeply curious about, having worked with Selfmade, what your thoughts on his move over to Vitality and that new roster is. Because people are going to be very interested in their 0-3 start, followed by much better games this week. I think we obviously expect this team to be dangerous in the long run.
Mm. I think Oscar is a very talented player. I think sometimes, his weakness and strength is that he goes off of intuition and feeling often. So his input and idea of what he needs to do in a game can change between days, honestly. And in terms of his highs, I think he has the potential to be like one of the best junglers for sure. Like mechanically, he's fantastic, very good mind for how to path, and he's a good player to keep. Right? In the context of us, like last year, why we decided to move in a different direction was because like Hilly and Selfmade, they were just thinking very, very different about the game, and they tried to go in the direction of leaning towards the other guy's play style or leading to the other play style, and we couldn't really find a balance, and we weren't ready to risk summer trying that again, because some issues, sometimes you have a dynamic and it has run its course for so long that some of the habits and the things that you do are just too deep, and it becomes too much of a strain to try to uproot that and start over, right? It's the same with, for example, like Reckless joining G2. He joined a team that already had a lot of habits, and the function of what they did and some of the things that they can't uproot were already in place. And Reckless joined that environment, and then all of the problems from maybe previous years were still a part of what they would try to do in that moment. And it's not necessarily that there's a problem with a specific player, it's just an environment where players have been viewed in a certain light, a certain way for so long that it becomes almost impossible to change. And this was the case, I feel, for our transition between spring and summer. I knew Selfmade was going to be a great jungler, but in our team, it made more sense to go in the direction of Whipple. So like him, in the context of Vitality, I think he's a good jungler to have. Vitality should be happy to have him. I think in that roster, I think he fits. And it's always an opportunity to reinvent yourself. Some of your bad habits, some of the things that maybe you didn't do so good in previous years, you have an opportunity to reinvent yourself. Because always, when you join a new team, you need to find your ground again. And then all of that luggage from the past that weighs over, because frustrations build, and if you work together with someone for 2 years, you begin to have expectations, you begin to have biases, and I think it was just the right move for Selfmade to begin anew, because in the end, this is a player with potential. We did the same going over to Team Liquid now, right? And it was the same, I remember back in Splice, we went to Worlds and we kept the roster together, and I left the team because in my mind, it didn't make sense to replace a player, but we needed a change in dynamic. They needed a new coach, they needed new players, they needed just something to stir things up so people could just renew themselves and start kind of a new chapter in their own book. But everything was so deeply rooted that it just didn't make sense anymore. Like, this is also very common in traditional sports, right? Where just a dynamic has run its course, right?
Yeah, you need the mental refresh for sure.
Pretty much.
I mean, I think with Vitality, I feel like this last week we got a preview of what I expect Vitality to become in the G2 game, because there's a lot of veteran presence on this team, and when you think about a lot of these players, you think about kind of in-game versatility when it comes to shot calling, and when we watch, and Selfmade's a very headstrong player. That's the kind of perception that I have of him. I don't know him at all, but from watching his play and kind of hearing tales about him. And what I really appreciated was that they're willing to be super creative in the game. Like, I love the fact that Selfmade basically started Jin Zhao red buff right on red side, and then walked literally across the entire map at level 2 to punish the Zyra Caitlyn push against Aphelios Thresh early. And I mean, that's a really bold move, because if that doesn't work, you're just fucked. So it did work, and they played it really well. But a lot of that snowball was what ended up winning the game. But the level of creativity and the level of risk was something that I found really fun to watch.
To me, the thing is, if you have a player like Selfmade, there are junglers out there where the job of that jungler is to service the team, it is to help other people be their best player in the game, be their best self, as it were. No pun intended, obviously. To me, if you have a player as skilled as Selfmade is, to some degree, the team has to also adapt to him and be structured around his strengths, which isn't going to fit every type of team. It's not going to be the most versatile team you've ever seen, because the point is, when this guy is on his champions and he is on his game, he is unbelievably mechanically good. Like, mate, this guy was giving Carson the fucking business at Worlds a few years ago before that series suddenly turned around. Like, it's genuinely one of the best players I think I've ever seen play jungle in the West. Just the raw skill level and expression. But as you say, Yamato, it does seem like he's somewhere where you have to sort of tune into his frequency, you know. He's not the guy who's going to play like fucking Smithy 4 years ago and just service everyone else on the map 24/7 and hope they carry the game, you know.
I would just like his potential is immense. And his his ability to be spontaneous and act on his feeling, that can be very, very strong, but sometimes it can also be like a liability. You know, sometimes he gets stuck in his own views. Because I can imagine, you know, what went. I can hear, like, when he level 2 ganked bot, I can literally hear his voice. It's like, these fucking guys, they pick Zyra support. I need a fucking Leona on my team, Nautilus. These are the champs that are always fisting me in the river. And these guys picking Zyra, I'm going to fucking show them to never fucking pick the shit again. I could hear these words in my head with Selfmade's voice. And this, in that moment, it's like the correct inclination, because, as you mentioned, like it won them the game, right? It's playing Zyra, no flash. And
well, especially because when I see Carzzy Aphelios, like, you know, I tend to become extremely nervous. This guy, I looked it up. He has like a 25% win rate on Aphelios in his career. Like, he has traditionally just been fucking awful at this champ. And so when I see it in lane and I'm like, oh man, he's going to get bullied by this Zyra and Caitlyn, and oh shit, he actually is terrible. Because Carzzy's much more of a, you know, he's an Ezreal player. He's a Varus player, you know, he's the kind of sit back and poke you kind of guy. And so to see him be so dominant on Aphelios, I would say is encouraging, potentially shows growth, but also I think really showed that everybody was on the same page in terms of what needed to happen in that game, and seeing it immediately and then pulling it out, and then a very kind of, I would say, pretty smooth snowball through the end of the game as well. You know, there are two kind of questions coming into this season, I think, for Vitality. The primary of which was, can the legend of Perkz, because Perkz is inherently going to draw respect even from very egocentric players, like, can the Perkz aura overcome the potential personality conflicts on this team? And the second of which is Carzzy good enough? Is Carzzy good enough? And those questions are still hovering out there in the ether. But I think like that's what I watch when I watch Vitality.
The thing that's weird, I wonder actually what Yamato would think of this, because I know during the off-season, I was actually quite surprised by almost like this little bidding war that was going on over Carzzy. Like, so many people were interested in signing him, but I looked and I was like, I thought he's coming off some fairly sort of underwhelming splits, even though his team's winning the championship. I mean, most times people thought like Hansama gapped him in the fucking spring finals. Most people thought by summer there wasn't even any discussion. Like, your bot lane was way better than the fucking one in Mad Lions, despite the fact Kaiser appears to be one of the best players of any role to come in the LEC in years. I'm amazed by the way he isn't the player that had the bidding war for him, but whatever, that's by the by. The issue I have with the Carzzy one is, it's implied from what I've heard, either A, the other pro players think he's better than he showed in those splits, like that was implied by the teams that want him, and then secondly, they also, within Mad Lions, I think, were even trying to imply he brings some like extra intangibles that like most ADCs don't. Like, they were trying to make it sound like he's not just like a brainless guy just left clicking or whatever and just mechanically playing. Like, you know, he's bringing some like some shot call and some planning elements. They were trying to imply he was like part of the communication. So I don't know what you've heard, Yamato. What's your perception on Carzzy? Because again, if you're making a super team, I'm surprised he was one of the names that got sort of thrown in there.
Yeah, honestly, I have to say that I was also surprised. And I mean, no disrespect to Carzzy at all, of course. Like, I think he's a decent player. Like, the Aphelios thing is like like as a good example, I think it requires like a lot more elegance than how he often likes to play. I think he's more of like a scrappy player that sometimes take risks that are not necessary in the game. But and it's like also like I remember when we were screaming Mad Lions before the finals, like our bot lane just hammered down on Carzzy so hard that this is like stuck in my memory. And also like at the World Championship we didn't scream Mad Lions at all, so I don't have any context from that. But I was also quite surprised of the status of Carzzy as a player, that he is like at the top of the top, like he is top one in the region. Because
part of the bidding part of the bidding was because Carzzy and Perkz are super close personally, so like because Vitality was one of those bidders as a result of Perkz, like that was definitely like driving his value up, right?
No, that makes sense, right? Like on my end, like I would keep Upset, of course, and I like Upset, Hansama. To me, were the two players that were like the standout AD carries in Europe, and then anything else was kind of up to debate. It's like wherever you place them, it's like I'm fine either way. There's nothing like super exciting. I think if there was two players that really stood out above everyone else, and that was Upset and Hansama. And Carzzy I wouldn't put in the same box, probably not even close from what I've seen. Maybe there's some intangible thing. I have no clue about it, but connections, of course, go a long way. And like I view him the same way. As like I remember his best moments was when playing like Syndra bot with like the very scrappy Mad Lions that took like a best of 5 off of G2. I remember that one. Like that was like, Carzzy had some good moments. He has like some. He played very brave, and sometimes died for it, and sometimes won the game for it, but doesn't have that level of elegance where, like for example, like when you play an Aphelios and you just space everyone so well, and you're just never in danger, and you just keep hitting everyone, you just keep bonking everyone with 8 basic attacks, and like that level of elegance. I think I haven't seen this all facets of being like a great AD carry be covered by Carzzy when I've seen that from Upset and Hansama. They're like meta proof in some shape or form. Want
to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.